So as a premier builder and developer, we constantly talk about functional floor plans, and today we're going to actually review what that means from a spatial requirement room by room. So stay tuned, because if you're building a custom home, you're going to want to know these dimensions as you work with your architect and your designers to get it right the first time. Let's get to it. So our first video in this series is going to cover our great room space, which is downstairs, as well as our downstairs primary bedroom. So what exactly is the perfect spatial requirements for modern day open concept living? Well, at Rebuild the Block, we believe in defined spaces. So instead of just having a large box, we want to be able to make sure that each space functions on its own. So in our great room space, it's really going to consist of four main components. It's going to be our living room, our kitchen, our dining, and then our pantry, which I'll get to in a second of why that's so important. So we're currently sitting at Duo, our coastal modern, and we have pretty tight lot tolerances. Ultimately, our lot is 60 by 100, so it's a 6,000 square foot lot. And we really had to be able to configure the spaces to be able to work appropriately. So the first space that I'm going to go over is our kitchen layout. Our kitchen layout has to have a minimum of 16 to 17 feet in width and about 14 to 15 feet in depth. And the main reason for that is we have a lot of components that we're trying to fit into this space. The first thing that you'll notice is obviously our island. And so when you're actually figuring out space, your island is going to be one of the critical components that are associated within this space. Our minimum island is usually a 4 by 8, although oftentimes we can go 4 by 10 or 4 by 12, depending on the length of the kitchen. In this particular space, the reason that we need at least 14 feet depth for our kitchen space is because we have a 2-foot countertop with at least a 4, but usually a 4.5 foot space in between the main run of the kitchen, another 4-foot island, and then at least another 2 or 3 feet of space to be able to travel around the island or to meet our eat-in kitchen requirements. So some of you that might have been doing the math realize that my math only equals about 12 to 13 feet. So why did I say that it needs to be about 15 feet wide? Well, ultimately you need a path of travel, and this is where it comes in to our living room layout. So one of the nice things that people enjoy is having a living room off of the kitchen. And this brings us to our living room dimensions. Our living room dimensions actually have to be a little bit wider to be able to accommodate path of travel. The minimum size that we've found for an open concept modern living situation in the living room is 21 feet wide by about 16 to 18 feet deep. Now, when you couple this with the kitchen, ultimately it creates your natural path of travel on each side. So in this case, we have the downstairs primary, which we need about a 3 to 3.5 minimum walk space, as well as what we typically want is at least 4 to maybe 4.5 or 5 feet minimum width between the kitchen and our living room. So when you add the additional 2 feet onto the kitchen and the additional 2 feet on to the living room, you're gonna have a total space of 21 feet by 31 feet in depth. This allows you to be able to have about 15 feet of furniture placement in the living room, as well as the 12-foot depth necessary to be able to accommodate your eating kitchen, while leaving you with an open space, in this case, about 5 or 6 feet of travel, dependent on your furniture layout. So that ultimately that leaves us with just 2 additional spaces downstairs that make up our open concept living, and that'll bring us to our dining room space. For our dining room space, we're typically gonna wanna see a 13.5 or 14-foot space by about a 10-foot space. And that's what we have in this dining nook. And once again, on the tight lot tolerances that we have within some of these neighborhoods, it's important to be able to get this space right. So it acts as a designated dining space while taking advantage of our path of travel that's associated both in the kitchen and in the living room. So ultimately this dining space takes up about 2 feet of where our kitchen would be associated, as well as about 2 feet of the space associated within our living room space. So with some of the smaller lots that we're dealing with, it's actually pretty difficult to get a fully dedicated dining space that's 140 to let's say 160 square feet for your dining needs. But by stealing just a couple feet from the kitchen and from the living, we're actually able to get a very workable and functional space within this dining room nook. As you can see, we're really only adding about 6 feet or so to this dining nook, but we're able to steal the additional 4 feet of path of travel that allows us to be able to snugly fit this absolutely critical component of luxury living into this overall open concept space. Now, a lot of people might say, Well, I actually like to have a more grand or open kitchen concept. However, what we've noticed is the key to successful kitchens, especially when dealing with a smaller lot, is to integrate them into the open space, but allow for additional storage with either a back kitchen or a storage pantry as located here right off the kitchen space. This allows us to be able to tuck our microwave in the back, as well as have a nice cabinet run that allows for additional kitchen and food storage, as well as a future opportunity to be able to add an additional fridge on the back run in this location. What I found is the ideal space for a pantry is typically a minimum of 6 feet wide by about 7 to 8 feet deep. And the main reason for that is so that you still have a good path of travel to be able to come in and out of the kitchen for storage needs. You have about 4 feet, so it doesn't seem too tight, so that you can be able to get your cabinetry run in here. And then if you're able to add a fridge later that comes out about 30 inches or so, will allow you to be able to have an additional 5 to 6 feet for landing, to be able to prepare any of the items and to be able to organize your storage needs that are tucked away from the open concept living that we've created. So overall, with these 4 main components that make up our kitchen, dining, and living room, we're gonna be somewhere between 700 and 750 square feet at a minimum. This is gonna break into about 350 square feet for our living room, about 260 square feet for our kitchen, about 140 square feet for our dining, and then 50 square feet for our pantry. Before we're done with the downstairs, let's talk about the secondary primary that we have downstairs that helps for generational living, and talk about the size requirements that are necessary to be able to ensure that we can get a king size bed in this ensuite. So our downstairs secondary suite that we have can accommodate a king size bed. Now for staging, we have a queen size bed in here, but the minimum requirements that I've found for a primary suite are gonna be 15 by 14 square feet. It's also going to be coupled with a walk-in closet as well as a bathroom that can accommodate 2 people. So typically a double vanity is going to be necessary to be able to consider it a primary suite. In this case, the minimum space requirements that we found for a primary suite are really going to be somewhere between 300 and 350 square feet in total, which would accommodate essentially 65 to 70 square feet for the bathroom, another 50 or 60 square feet for the closet, and then about 150 to 170 square feet that would be associated in the main room. One of the things that I feel distinguishes a primary suite within the home is that they have an exterior exit to the home. And in this case, we've been able to accommodate a 10-foot by 8-foot sliding glass door that mirrors the slider that we have in the dining room, as well as the 3-panel slider that's associated in the living room, to be able to create continuity and overall architectural integrity with the exterior elevation of the home. And since I mentioned that we're at our Project Duo, Coastal Modern, the additional primary upstairs obviously has the views, but it's important for generational living that you have a downstairs primary suite so that someone can be able to live and function on a single level throughout the home. This also provides opportunity for either grandparents, parents, and or additional guests to be able to reside in the home without having to travel up and down the stairs day in and day out. My hope with this series is that we've taken our discussion of a functional floor plan yet one step closer to being able to allow you to be able to extract some value of the 10 years of development experience that we've had in the luxury space here in Phoenix. However, the dimensions that are associated within these spaces that we just covered will be beneficial for anyone that's building within any luxury development on tight lot tolerances, as mentioned. So ultimately, the square footages that encompass this house could be accommodated by many of those that are building either in the inner city as well as those on the fringe markets like we are here in Arcadia. Continue the next video if you'd like to have more information about the square footage that's associated on our upper level that'll be coming out next week. And as always, have a great day.